Bangladesh is at the brink, and today we witness how a nation's unrest is sinking youth aspirations and fracturing its future. Namaskar, you're watching The Global Eye with me, Mousumi. Let's put forth a few questions our nation must answer. What happens when a country's youth, once the engine of hope, begin to inherit fear instead of opportunity? What does it mean when political protest turns into street violence, when justice is replaced by mob rule, and when minorities begin to hide rather than belong? Is Bangladesh witnessing temporary turbulence before elections or the slow collapse of social trust that no ballot can repair? And most importantly, can a nation progress when its young generation is growing up amid assassinations, communal lynchings, silenced media, and an ever-expanding role of the army in civilian life? Tonight we examine how Bangladesh, once praised for economic resilience and demographic promise, now stands at a dangerous crossroads where instability threatens not just governance but the very future of its youth. The spark that lit the fire must be known, and the death of a youth leader. The death of Sharif Osman Hadi, a prominent student leader and political mobiliser, was not merely a tragedy. It became a catalyst. Shot during an election campaign and later dying abroad from his injuries, Hadi's death exposed a brutal truth. Political participation itself has become life-threatening in Bangladesh. For a generation that believed ballots could replace bullets, this was a psychological rupture. The streets erupted not only in grief but in rage. What followed was not controlled dissent but unleashed unrest, spilling across cities, campuses, and institutions. And then we see from protest to anarchy, a burning law and order crisis. What began as demonstrations quickly mutated into violent disorder, and disorder seems to be a normal in Bangladesh today. Media houses were attacked and set ablaze, journalists were assaulted for reporting facts, cultural institutions were vandalized, diplomatic premises were targeted, the army was deployed to restore control. This escalation matters deeply, because when protest abandons principle, youth lose faith in peaceful change. For young Bangladeshis, the message is chilling. Speak up and you may be silenced. But here we see youth themselves are the part of anarchy. Report and you may be burned. It's a common scene in Bangladesh today, and minorities are under siege. We see the moral collapse. Perhaps the most disturbing signal of Bangladesh's recent is the open targeting of minorities. The lynching and burning alive of a Hindu man over alleged blasphemy was not an isolated act of madness. It was a symptom of state failure. When mobs replace courts, when rumors replace law, and when identity becomes a death sentence, democracy is already bleeding. Minority youth today are not dreaming of innovation or leadership. They are calculating survival. A country cannot claim progress when entire communities live in fear during political upheaval. And we also witness media silenced and the truth buried. A democracy without free media is a body without a pulse. The attack on major newspaper offices marks a dangerous turn. Truth itself is now a target. When journalists are intimidated and newsrooms destroyed, the youth are left navigating chaos without facts. This creates fertile ground for misinformation, radicalization, and manipulation, especially among unemployed and politically frustrated young people. But will the young people realize? We also see the huge failure of leadership where does this governance go wrong? Under the interim leadership of Muhammad Yunus, expectations were high. Yet the unfolding crisis exposes uncomfortable realities. Failure to prevent political violence, failure to protect minorities, failure to safeguard media freedom, and failure to reassure a fearful generation. Calling for calm is not governance. Declaring mourning is not justice. And silence in the face of communal violence is not neutrality. It is abdication. For the youth, leadership now appears reactive, fragile, and disconnected from street realities. And what about the youth paying the price? A generation is at risk today. Bangladesh's greatest asset has always been its young population. But today, that asset is being systematically exhausted. Education disrupted by unrest, jobs stalled by instability, political hope crushed by violence, civic trust eroded by impunity. This is how nations lose generations, not overnight but gradually, as ambition turns into apathy and anger. Disillusioned youth do not build economies. They migrate, radicalize, or withdraw. And what about the regional and global isolation looms? The attack on foreign diplomatic facilities and the resulting travel advisory signal something deeper. Bangladesh is risking isolation. When stability falters, investment hesitates. When mobs rule, diplomacy retreats. And when credibility weakens, young people lose access to global opportunity. It is a warning, not a prediction. Bangladesh is not yet a failed state, but it is flirting dangerously with failure of purpose. This is no longer just a political crisis, it is a civilizational test. A nation cannot march forward while youth leaders are killed, minorities are hunted, media is burned, mobs decide guilt, and fear replaces hope. If this trajectory continues, Bangladesh risks creating a lost generation. Young people who inherit chaos instead of confidence, rage instead of reform. History is unforgiving to nations that ignore early warnings. The question now is stark and unavoidable. Will Bangladesh choose justice over mobs, inclusion over extremism, and leadership over silence? Or will it allow instability to consume the very generation meant to carry it forward? The future is watching, and so is the youth. For more updates and insights, keep watching The Global Eye.